Welcome everybody. Thank you, Michael Brown. Yes, happy hoodie day. It is fall. Fall is upon us, and it's my favorite time of year at the winery. It's the dawn of a new harvest, and while I know we won't get to see the wines, or the grapes rather, so the grapes that are coming in right now, we're not going to see those wines for another several months or even a couple of years in some cases. But it's like the freshman class of grapes arriving at the winery. They're going to go through the whole process down in the cellar, and then eventually they will graduate to our glasses for consumption. So it's an exciting time for us, and the winery smells at its absolute best this time of year. I started at Lynfred in September, all the way back in 2008. And the first time I opened up the doors to the winery to enter for my interview, I smelled that aroma of the freshly arrived grapes and the beginning stages of the fermentation process. And now, 12 years later, that is a really nice sensory memory for me. I get to visit Roselle. I work exclusively out of Wheeling now, but whenever I go down to Roselle, and I make a point to every September, I get to go in and smell that freshly arrived harvest and go through sort of that reliving of every memory that I have through Linfred over a decade now. So it's comforting. It's like coming home, and in the spirit of homecoming, especially during difficult times, I think there is something to be said for fall flavors that really sort of ground us and bring us back to base one. So Hoodies and Goodies is the name of the game today. When I named this event Hoodies and Goodies, it was inspired by a previous event that we had done pairing fall food and wines. Something I had forgotten since the last time we did the event is that I no longer own a hoodie. So in lieu of a hoodie today, I am sporting my Harvest. How's that for you? But it is also almost 80 degrees today, so we are removing the Harvest, so that way I don't pass out on camera a little bit later. So welcome everybody. It is Thirsty Thursday. Grab your glass. Cheers. We'll talk a little bit about what I'm drinking in just a moment, but got to get the palate soaked before we can really dive in for everything. So the cool thing with fall flavors is that we're going to be able to touch on every style of wine that Linford produces today. So a lot of times people think, well, we're getting into the colder months, we're going to be focusing on really big, heavy tannic reds or oaky, buttery Chardonnays. And yes, they have their place this time of year and will continue to be showcased over the course of the next several months as we kind of hunker down in our homes with the cold weather coming. But there's other wines that have a rightful place here as well, including some of our summer favorites like crisp, dry white wines and rosés. So through the course of this today, we're going to talk about how sometimes those summery flavors work with some of our heavier fall foods that we're going to be eating because it refreshes the palate. And the other added bonus is it's that time of year in the Midwest where you have frost on your windshield in the morning and then shorts weather by lunch. And so we want to have wines that are going to be able to transition with us throughout the day. And sometimes those clean, crisp whites can do that for us. One of my favorite snacks this time of year is taking some warm herb roasted nuts and little sea salt on those. You can bake it off in the oven for 10-15 minutes just to kind of heat everything up. But rosemary, thyme, sea salt, maybe a little cayenne pepper, and then pair that warm out of the oven with a really crisp cold glass of Viognier. And so that honey aromatic from the Viognier and that really nice cold sensation when it hits your palate gets balanced out then by the herb and the salt and the nuttiness of the nuts, and they marry so beautifully together. So it's a fall treat. It feels like the kind of thing that you would snack on while like introspectively looking out over a lake and watching leaves fall, and like maybe it's that moment where you're making the big decision. That's the opportunity to bust out the cold Viognier and your warm nuts to help guide you into that next phase. When it comes to this time of year, it is football season, and I know nothing about the pigskin, but I can tackle a bottle of wine with the best of them. Problem is, once I put the first down, I'm likely to fumble. Okay, that's about the extent of my football knowledge, but we're going to do our best to figure this out as we go, so bear with me. So game day foods. It's a lot of salt, a lot of spice, a lot of fat that's going to be coming at us as we're looking to sort of gorge ourselves during our Sunday, Monday night, or even Thursday night football rituals. I think I got the days right on that one. So kind of our main territories here, we've got your brats, going backwards here. So I got my brats. All right, I've got my wings, and then I got my dips and spreads. So by no means the full scope of everything that's on the table, but this is what we're going to be focusing on today. Now to go along with these, I've got sort of my front line that's going to be able to tackle just about everything on that plate. So aromatic whites are a really good opportunity to showcase with each and every one of these. These guys can go in and work with just about any one of these flavors and work out really well for us in the end. On the other side of that, off-dry white wines. These are another cool opportunity to sort of balance out some of that intensity that we have coming our way. So the spiciness, the saltiness. We refresh that with the off-dry white. Now sometimes off-dry whites and aromatic whites are one and the same. We can see those two coming together and working out really well. Other times you get a drier aromatic white, a sweeter aromatic white, or a sweeter non-aromatic white. End of the day, these are all going to work well together. Robust reds are another option that you have here, but depending on how you go and what you're sort of facing when it comes to each of these three food types, you might find it's better to scale back on the robust and maybe go for something a little bit more balanced and maybe a little bit lighter. And then when all else fails, get out of jail free card is going to be your sparkling wine. That's going to be able to tackle anything in here, take it right into the end zone for you. So there's your play-by-play for how to attack the buffet this Sunday. But let's talk about brats and sausage. So I have a friend that lives in Seattle, and whenever I often forget that I have an accent, but I am very much quickly reminded whenever I use certain words when I'm visiting Seattle. And Polish sausage is one of those things where it just kind of rolls off my tongue, and that long nasal A just sort of sticks with me. Same deal with when I introduce myself as Matt. You know, so part of living in the Midwest, and I celebrate it with some Polish sausage or a brat. Got a couple different options to consider here when it comes to the wine pairing side of things. So we think about brats, we think about kind of German fare in general, and the old adage of if it grows together, it goes together really comes into play here. So I've got a Gewürztraminer here with me today. This is our 2016 Gewürztraminer. This falls into that aromatic and off-dry characteristic there. Gewürztraminer, while it has a super German-sounding name, is technically a French varietal, depending on how you dispute the territory where the Alsace region is now. So Alsace is this sort of seven-shaped province in France now. At times it was German, at times it was French. So for all intents, we're going to call this Franco-German. But the Gewürztraminer here, Gewürztraminer or Gewürztraminer, or just Gewürz. Gewürz is going to be the easiest way to order it. We'll know exactly what you're looking for. Gewürztraminer is fun because you get a little bit of sweetness, and you also get a little hint of spice to it. That's actually where Gewürz comes from. There's the idea of a baking spice. And so that, married up with your brat or your Polish, are going to work out really well and be able to sort of refresh the palate as you eat that nice, heavy, satisfying, meaty dish. On the other side of that, if we want to celebrate that smokiness or the meatiness that we have going on there, that's an opportunity where we're going to bust out one of those red wines. So in this case, I'm going to say let's go for the Tiroligo. So Tiroligo, an Italian varietal. So we've got Franco, German, Italian now. We're going to basically get the whole Western Europe taken care of by the time we're done with this. But Tiroligo is a really fun one because there's a little bit of fruit content, so it's a bit brighter on the palate, but you also get the intensity of the oak, some tannin, some structure there, some nice complexity, and some spice as well on the more peppery side of things. So if we think about baking spices on the Gewürztraminer side, this is going to be our more peppery spice side with the Tiroligo. Either way you go, it's going to be nice and delicious. I think another option to go for always, your get out of jail free card when it comes to food and wine pairing, is sparkling wine. Anything with a bubble is going to pair with just about everything. And the nice thing with the sparkling brut or the sparkling rosé brut is that it's dry on the palate, you get the bubbles that sort of lighten the whole experience for you, and is going to work with just about everything that you have on the table. In the spreads world, we think about so many different tips and spreads, but one of my favorites is one that I grew up with. It was a after-school snack for us, and that was a sharp cheddar cheese spread. So think about like Kakana or what's the other one? Merck's. So something that's really good on a cracker, has a pretty intense, sharp cheddar quality to it. It's also really good on a burger too. And it's next level heavenly for me. I mean, I absolutely love that flavor profile. And the same rules are going to apply. If I want to go on more of the appley brighter side to balance out with the cheese, I'm going to go for that Riesling or that Gewürztraminer to get a nice flavor profile occurring there. Otherwise, if I want to match wits with the intensity of the sharpness there, I'm going to go with wines that traditionally go with aged or sharper cheddar cheeses. And I think that Giraldago could also find a way to work in there because it's going to balance out on a different end, almost like a berry note to balance out with the saltiness of the cheese. Either way, no matter how you go, you're eating spreadable cheese, and that's a good day in my book. Wings are something else that can be difficult because a wing, it's chicken, but it has a more intense, meatier quality to it. So we've got a couple different options to go for here. The biggest thing that you want to watch out for is the vinegar. So part of the reason why beer is often so perfect with game day foods is because of the vinegar aspect. So there's a chemical reaction that occurs with vinegar and wine. And as it hits your palate, sometimes it doesn't jive all that well. So if you take like a balsamic vinaigrette on your salad, and then you have an acidic wine with that, it's a major acid overload and can sometimes sort of ruin your palate for the moment. And beer, on the other hand, is going to be able to work well with that vinegary quality. So yes, there is a proponent of beer with your game day foods here. But wine's going to work with everything too. We just have to find the right balance. So when it comes to matching up with your wings, match your sauce or your predominant flavor profile. So don't worry so much about whether or not it's a white or a red for the chicken. I think your best bet is going to be to go for another one of the aromatics, another one of the off-dry, or maybe even throw a rosé into the mix. Oktoberfest is another awesome one for this time of year. Where's my Oktoberfest? There it is. So Oktoberfest, this is our sweet Riesling blend that we release every September. And Oktoberfest is leaning on the sweeter end of the spectrum. But when you get something like hot sauce, which really good recipe for buffalo chicken dip on here, you need to balance out that spiciness a little bit. And that's where a little bit of that sweet Riesling is going to come into play with our good friend Oktoberfest, which is only $12 a bottle. Can't go wrong with that. So keeping in the tradition of game day foods, also a good opportunity to use my good friend, the slow cooker. I am not the most proficient home chef, so the slow cooker is my my get out of jail free card, kind of like sparkling wines are. It's something where I know I can sort of set it and forget it, and what I like is that I can load everything in, turn it on, go about my business, and then when I come back, the house smells awesome, and the food is, by and large, pretty delicious. So with chili, I made a chicken chili today, just keeping things a little bit healthier in anticipation of some sort of waistline anticipation later on. We've got that game day tradition going with chili. And so, again, we're going to try to match up with the predominant spices in there, not necessarily whether it's chicken or beef, but something that's going to work well on both ends of the spectrum. So if I want to go clean and crisp, another opportunity to bring in that nice chilled Viognier that's going to refresh my palate a little bit, maybe even cool it down from the heat. If I really go intense with the hot sauce later, obviously I'm going to need a little bit more sugar content in my wine just to make sure that I'm not totally burning my palate. If I'm going to go the red wine route, I'm just going to lean on the lighter and fruitier side of the spectrum. I think it's a good way to avoid having the tannin kind of hit the spice and not really balance out all that well. If I'm going the stew route, match weight and match the predominant spice. So that's where our Giraldago is going to come in handy really all across the board because we've got that beautiful spice content to it, and it also can handle some intensity like if we had a beef stew or something like that. If I've got more of a soup feel going on, and I'm going for like a brothier soup, opportunity to use that Viognier, a Pinot Grigio. Think about it like if I would have squeezed some lemon juice into the soup, I might want to find a wine that's going to have some of those brighter lemony qualities to it. On the other hand, if I'm sticking with reds, Pinot Noir or a lighter bodied Zinfandel is a really nice way to bring in a little bit of fruit content and some complexity that doesn't completely overwhelm the wine. If you go too tannic, if you go too intense, so your Cabernets, your really big bold Merlots, it's sometimes too much for the soup and it can't really stand up to it in the end. So we want to have sort of an even playing field to balance out those flavors. Bisques, on the other hand, where we get those really nice, thick, creamy soups. This is where our old pal Chardonnay comes back into play. There's a reason why Chardonnay works so exceptionally well this time of year. and it really comes down to it's full-bodied. It can be buttery if we did that oak aging on it. If we did the batonnage where it gets really nice and creamy consistency there, we're matching up with that richness. This is a wine that likes to marry rich. Whereas if we wanted to cut through some of that intensity, maybe we don't want to be totally weighed down by our bisque, we get another full-bodied white like Viognier, but doesn't have the oak aging and maybe has a punch more acidity to it, so that way when it hits our palate, we're able to sort of kind of cut through that fattiness or that intensity of the soup. Roasting is something else that's really big this time of year, and so what I would say is match up with the herbs that you're going to be using. So winter herbs or fall herbs that I really enjoy this time of year, we've got our rosemary, which smells quite delicious, and we've got our thyme here as well. So these are herbs that are going to hold their flavor really well and hold up in the oven at those high temperatures. And so think about wines that already have some of those notes in them. So when we go in summertime, we see a lot of Sauvignon Blancs and Pinot Grigios. Sauvignon Blanc has a grassiness to it. Pinot Grigio has almost a basil-like or pesto quality to it in some of those notes. Those will work this time of year, but I'm going to seek out things like Syrah or Pinot Noir or even Riesling, which will embody thyme, maybe a little bit of rosemary, some sage notes going on in there. So we want to play up some of those herbs that are going to be used in a lot of our cooking right now. Treat the wine as an extension of the plate. So if you think about, I'm having like a roasted pork with herbs, and I would normally do something appley with that. Maybe I find a wine that has some apple notes to then complement all of those flavors. Because if it goes together on our plate, if it's the kind of thing where it would logically be a good side for us, if we can find that as an extension within the wine, we've just basically made the wine an essential part of the meal. That's something that the French do. Their wine is not necessarily seen as superfluous. It is a vital part of the meal because it's supposed to work well with everything that you have on the plate. Herbaceousness, it's one of those words that we love to talk about in the wine industry. You sound smart when you say herbaceous. Herbaceousness in grapes generally will come from the whole idea of terroir, or sort of the grounds, the conditions that created those individual grape varietals. And so we'll see that reflected in what grows in the general vicinity, sometimes making its way into the flavor profiles of the wine. And so it's kind of a cool way to sort of break down the herbaceous side, because a lot of times we focus on spice, we focus on fruit, we focus on oak. Herbs are super interesting to find in your wine as well, and especially this time of year, I think a really fun way to sort of play up the role that herbs are going to be playing for us. And as long as we're on the subject of things that we're roasting, I think we've also got to give a shout out to savory pumpkin or squash dishes. So I've got my acorn squash here. This one's going to get roasted up within the next couple days, probably when the temperatures go back down a little bit. But we get some maple going in there, maybe a little bit of curry powder or cayenne, something to spice it up a little bit. But again, that Chardonnay is going to work really, really well here because it can sort of handle the caramelized flavors that we're going to get from the roasting process without completely overwhelming the squash here. Because I still want to not separate the squash. I want to celebrate the squash. Now, I know there are Chardonnay haters in the world. I know that some people cringe whenever we say Chardonnay. So I'll always have an alternative for you, and that is actually what I am drinking today. So today I have, just in time for Halloween, a red wine, basically that is masquerading as a white wine, or vice versa. Either way, it's sort of an elevated rosé. This is our Rosa Legero. So Rosa Legero, this one came out back in January, and this is Pinot Noir juice fermented over Muscat skins. And so what we do is retain all of those beautiful flavor profiles and characteristics that we expect from Pinot Noir, but brighten it up like a rosé, and then you get the aromatics with the Muscat, and it makes for fruity, lively, really kind of inviting elevated rosé, really, really light red, or really, really deep white, depending on how you want to look at it, but something that's going to work well with a lot of different flavor profiles and has enough of a backbone to hold up to some of those more intense roasted flavors. So a lot of cherry, get a little bit of strawberry on the palate as well, but just delicious. Really, really nice. If you've not tried the Rosa Legero yet, definitely one to check out. And again, just because we're after Labor Day doesn't mean that we need to stash the rosé away. Rosé still has a very strong place on our wine rack for the foreseeable future. I will argue rosé is good all year long, but especially this time of year. We're seeing the temperature fluctuations, and we're seeing some flavor profiles that really do marry well with those rosés and those bright, crisp whites. Now, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about sweet stuff today. So when it comes to sweets, of course, we have the apple world. We've got some Honeycrisp apples here behind me that I picked up at the market, and super excited to dive into some of those fall desserts. And so when it comes to apple desserts, think about things that go well with apple. So baking spices are really nice there. So I'm going to look for flavor profiles that have some of those baking spices. So I've got some cinnamon here. I've got some nutmeg. Nutmeg's also really good with our like those bisques and those creamier dishes too. It's a really cool way to get a little bit of that nuttiness in there, and it's something that sort of shines even though there's so many other flavors going on. Got some clove, another one that's good for both sweet and savory. And then one I think sometimes that gets overlooked is cardamom. And cardamom's cool because there's a sweetness to it, and there's a lemony or a bright citrusy note that you can find when you smell it. And all in balance, but all these spices together with our beautiful baked apples are going to be outstanding. Now what to pair it with? I think spiced apple is always a safe bet for us. So our spiced apple, we use Honeycrisp and Gala apples, and then spice it with cinnamon and star anise. And this one's fun because you can do it a few different ways. So I can chill this one if I'm looking for something that's going to be bright and refreshing when it's almost 80 degrees like today. I can also serve this one room temperature if I want to have a little bit more of that enveloping characteristic to it. But then when it starts getting really cold out, I can then heat the spiced apple, and it's really satisfying. It's like a warm apple cider at that point. The one thing is, of course, don't let it boil because then you just burnt away the fun. But you can also doctor it up as well. So as long as we're on the subject of doctoring things up, I've got my good friend whiskey or bourbon that works really, really well with that flavor profile. So bourbon and apple all coming together. So you take a shot of that into your glass of warm spiced apple. Outstanding. You can also play around with flavored whiskeys or spirits right now. So cinnamon whiskey is really, really good with our spiced apple. Salted caramel whiskey is another one too. This is one I know that our marketing director Christina happens to love because she introduced it to me on her boat last summer, and it's dangerous and it's delicious, and with a little bit of spiced apple, it's like a caramel dipped apple. So there's peanut butter whiskeys. I mean, find whiskeys that are going to have flavor profiles that you want to have to work with apple, and it's going to be delicious. Maple is another fun one to play around with. And so when I look at maple notes, generally I'm going to think in terms of some of our port style wines. So I've got some of the Cihuela open. This is the plum port, and with the plum port, we do get a little bit of that like brown sugar, molasses, or maple quality. So I might look at this as something that would go well with like a ginger cookie or even pancakes and waffles. Might as well get the day started right with a little bit of port wine with your waffles. And then of course, this is the time of year where a lot of people transition from rosé all day to pumpkin spices life. So the pumpkin spice latte has earned its rightful place in our culture at large. It is that time of year, and I went a little crazy and got just about every pumpkin spiced flavored thing that I could find last time I was at the store. It's a really kind of cool opportunity to play around with some of those flavors this time of year. But to marry that, we don't make a pumpkin wine at Lynfred, but we're going to look for flavors that are going to work well with pumpkin. And so cranberry, and in this case our sparkling cranberry, is a really fun way to marry with those pumpkin and those spice notes. So again, going back to the whole waffle thing, I can do like a savory pumpkin waffle, maybe a little bit of fried chicken with that, and then suddenly I've got some sparkling cranberry, and that is fall dish beyond belief. Chardonnay, another one that's going to work really, really well with pumpkin, just like it did on the savory side of things. It has some of those same characteristics for how we're going to be treating it when it's a sweeter pumpkin, so might as well play up that angle as well. And then, of course, old standby is spiced apple. Spiced apple and pumpkin, those flavor profiles are going to marry together because they're things that already work well with apples we're just adding pumpkin into the mix, and maybe a little bit of, butter, quite a bit of butter in this case. So whenever it comes to fall food and wine, I hope that you will continue to try new things, to branch out from the expected Chardonnays and big bold reds. But if you also love those, by all means, keep drinking them. Super excited. We've got some fun new things on the horizon. We've got another Facebook Live, it'll be a Zoom member mixer coming up on October 7th. And hopefully within the next couple days, I'll have these out on the shelves. But we now have Linford Masks. So these are 2-ply Linford Masks with, now that I knocked my glasses off, they have a pouch. So if you wanted to add a filter in there, you can get up to 3 or 4-ply for your mask if you add another filter or fold it over in there. So a nice way to keep yourself protected and also promote your favorite winery in the process. As always, it's a pleasure to see you all virtually. I look forward to seeing you all in the tasting room. And cheers to a very happy Thirsty Thursday and some hoodies and goodies. Thanks, everybody.